Ile serikali iliwanyima kazi na ikawanyima kiongozi mwenye wali.
Hatujaipata leader in Kenya mwenye anashughulikia youth.
The boss says they should kill order continue.
I swear to God, I did not kill that child.
Get your filthy hands off me!
Unajua ni polisi, lakini unajua kwa hii country mnyonge ana haki.
Mimi sina shida na nani amekuwa rais. Shida yangu kubwa ni watu innocent watazidi kufa mpaka lini.
Hapa kwa street hakuna mtu innocent.
Since when the 6-month-old child go to the street to riot?
Si kila mtu ameuliwa na polisi uletwa hapa. Wengine utupwa. Wapi? Sijui. Labda kwa lake.
After considering the evidence tendered before this honorable court by both the prosecution and the defense, this court finds
Tayari kupanda. Situpigie show.
Hapa pale
Na trials tulipiga last weekend. Ndio tunaenda kuambia kama tumepenya ama tumeogelea.
And that is why he was my top pick for the strikers representing the Kenyan team in Norway.
Msema Norway tunaingia na ndege ya saa ngapi?
Kwa msutani sana.
If only I had the last say.
Nenda Brazil kuongezwa haga ama?
Mara 4 coaches nimetolewa nyama kwa mdomo. Wenda huko. Mimi niondokea. Unajua lazima nisurvive huku nje kasisi. Alafu situation yangu pale mtaani tricky.
Niliambia hospital wangu kama ndio dialysis. It's been 11 days.
This is weird, but imagine mimi sitakujaji.
Cheki bro, unaweza kuwa audition fiti sana kwa kikosi yako.
I'm killing these bitches, nakwambia I'm killing these bitches. Mr. Your copy, Mr. Your copy, Mr. Your copy, Mr. Your copy.
Nitume hata sidi yangu ati nitakuja nikuwekea to watch.
Mr. Your copy, Mr. Your copy, Mr. Your copy, Mr. Your copy. Tanifitisho tumezoea. Mr. Your copy, Mr. Your copy, Mr. Your copy, Mr. Your copy, Mr. Your copy.
Kulikuwa umesiti kwa rasa.
Good morning and welcome to this panel discussion on film distribution in the 21st century. This is a very, very important discussion, and I'm so happy that you're able to join us this morning. Of course, we would have hoped that we will be able to do this physically, but situations do not allow us to do that right now. But hey, guess what? We are still going to interact, we are still going to engage, we are still going to have a fruitful discussion at the end of this session. So asanteni sana from wherever you are, thank you for joining us. I also want to give a special welcome to my panelists who will introduce themselves. But before I do that, I just want to advise everybody, if your mic is on and you're joining in online, please mute it so that we don't get the background noise. But if you do have a question or you have a comment or a suggestion, raise your hand, or you can also go to our Facebook and YouTube page and share your comment, and we'll be able to discuss and share that with you. So again, asanteni sana. This is going to be a great discussion. It's not a debate. It's going to be a discussion as to what it is that is happening right now, what happened maybe in the past, and what it is that we can be able to do going forward in terms of film distribution. I've got a wonderful panel. My name is Wageshi Murage. I am the CEO and founder of Media Pros Africa, which is a media consultancy firm here in Kenya, but we work with industry stakeholders from all over the world with regards to providing media solutions in production, distribution, marketing, training, and all that. So the people who are joining me today, I'm fortunate enough to have worked with them or know some of them, but I would like them to introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Miss Vanessa Nasabi. I hope I have pronounced your name well. If you don't mind, panelists, just give a brief introduction of who you are, what you do, so that we know how then we can be able to direct this discussion. Miss Vanessa, karibu sana.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me on the panel today. It's always a pleasure to speak on your panels. I'm Vanessa Putelezi, and I'm a commissioning editor from Johannesburg, South Africa. I currently work for the MultiChoice Group.
Thank you, Vanessa. If I may move on to Mr. Philip Hoffman.
Yes, good morning. Hello, my name is Philip Hoffman. I'm sorry we're not able to see each other in person on the stage at the case this morning and do this from our hotel rooms or wherever we are. I'm founder and managing director of a company called Rushlick Media with offices in Nairobi and Cologne, Germany. So we're in the business of selling African films internationally since 10 years almost. And in the meantime, we also run a streaming channel called Titpix, which is available more or less globally. And yeah, happy to be with you this morning.
Thank you, Philip. Okay, let's now hear from Mr. Jeff Mandela.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeff Mandela. It's short for Japheth. I am a university lecturer and an animator from Ada Animation Studios. And I lecture at the United States International University in Africa in Nairobi. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, and then we have Ms. Zoya Ahmed.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to the panel. My name is Zoya Ahmed. I'm working for a pay TV company, that's Zuku, that distributes content across Africa. I'm the content and channels acquisition manager at Zuku, and I've been working in the market for 13 years now. So yeah, it's good to interact with everyone on this panel.
Thank you, Zoya. And that is our amazing panelists. You know, you can see it's very diverse. We all handle different things, but the one thing that brings us together is in film distribution. How do we go about this? What are the needs? How do we address this? So it's very important that we understand this. And so I'm going to start by asking a question to all the panelists. What do you understand by this topic, this title, when we are talking about film distribution in the 21st century? Because what comes to mind for me is it different? And why is it different? And what it is that we're doing. So I'm going to open this up to the panel. Maybe I can start with, I can see Philip wants to say something.
Okay, happy to start. Thank you for that question. Well, I think the predominant challenge we're having these days is creating awareness, right? We're basically in a world where everybody of us, we all know that, right? We can access any time of content, anytime, any place, anywhere. We all have these kind of machines right in our hands. So basically everything is available to us. So, and from a filmmakers, content producers, distributors point of view, is always the question: how do I get through? How to get the eyeballs with my particular work, with my particular content? And we know how much is going on a single platform like YouTube, with several hundred hours of new content being uploaded every minute, as far as numbers are available. And again, yeah, that's creating awareness and getting eyeballs for what I did is absolutely crucial and key these days, and the biggest challenge.
Okay, great. Let me do a follow-up on this question, because you have raised creating awareness. I want to throw this to you, Vanessa, as a commissioning editor for MultiChoice. How then are you able to engage with the audiences in the 21st century? I know MultiChoice hasn't been there, of course, for many years, but you've done some good time. Has there been a difference or a shift in terms of how you create awareness, as Philip is talking about?
Yes, so Philip raised a great point in terms of accessibility, right? It's so easy nowadays to get a hold of anyone on this panelist and ask to have your movie distributed, and vice versa. So we always have eyes on the market, as you know. So we are more likely to approach producers, directors, and so forth. But with that, because with ease, everything becomes complex, right? So it's very important for people to be aware of the terms and conditions of that come with film distribution, and some places may not be fair, may not be as fair as others. So I think creating awareness around who you get your film distributed with is very vital, and how you go about that. So with us, we've always had a portal where filmmakers can submit their films, and we then license those films. So ours is very protected. But I do know of cases where people have films to other distributors, and got the short end of the stick. So it's very important. Accessibility is so easy.
Okay, great. I'll circle back on that, but let me hear Zoya's response to that as well. Has this made any difference with Zuku and Wananchi Group in terms of the shift from audiences, maybe migrating from one platform to the other? And how is that working for your business?
I think it's an opportunity for the filmmakers to come through. There's more also connectivity. They have a wide variety of platforms to go through now, with how the shift has been with pandemic, with all those things. Instead of the traditional way of going to theaters and releasing it there's more of opportunity. Now there's more connectivity, there's more the filmmaker themselves on social media, they can go and get their feedback. There's more audiences, and it's at the comfort of at the homes. People can watch those movies. So it's more of an opportunity opened up with the digital distribution. So and it's changed. It's more of connectivity. At first, there was the physical interaction, and then when the pandemic and when digital, there's more. There's also a connectivity through the digital platforms. So I think it's an opportunity that's opened up. There's more room. There's more distribution opportunities in the different platforms. There's more online these days. Everything is there. There's the different platforms for online. So it's various opportunities opened up.
Okay, great. Jeff, what would your response be to what Zoya and also Vanessa have spoken about? Because I see you are an animator. You own an animation studio. So you're a producer, you're on this other end. Do you agree with their sentiments? Are there more opportunities? Could there be more? Has it changed? What's your perspective on this?
Yeah, I think I'll speak on two capacities. Maybe a slight correction there. I am not the owner. I am just the head of animation. But all in all, being a startup, it's, as I said, I'll speak on two capacities. One, as a university lecturer who interacts with a lot of students who make films. And secondly is as an independent studio, animation studio. Now, specific to animation, as you all know, it's a relatively new field in the continent, and it's a relatively new market. And at the moment where we are, the current state of it, the only way that we can distribute or we can, show our work off, of course, it's through social media. That's the cheapest and easiest way to do it. But if you were to approach it in a more in a more structured setup, I would say the film festivals are the nearest thing that we have to being, picked up by major studios or major corporations out there. So speaking from as an independent studio, the current state of the industry is that the nearest thing that we have to distribution is through social media and film festivals, because we have not yet reached a point whereby our content is now purely picked up by major studios and run to global audiences out there.
Okay, Philip, what would be your response to that? Because you are a global distribution company, Rushlink. Do you agree with Jeff's sentiments in terms of social media and film festivals are basically the push or the driver towards how it is that we communicate and disseminate content to our audiences? And what is your role in that?
Well, yes, I would say I agree to a very wide extent. I mean, in the traditional independent space, when it, a little bit off, what's typically a genre film, of course, pre-pandemic has been like festivals has been the way of building up awareness for films, right? And to set up a proper festival strategy, to start with a big festival, and then ideally keeping the film alive on festivals for half a year or so, was the predominant way of doing that. And the way is not gone. Let me carefully say, I think it became a bit more challenging, just due to the sheer overabundance again of films and content we see out there. Plus, of course, over the pandemic, the festival landscape has slightly changed, right, for obvious reasons. And then we're quickly with all kind of digital markets, right? And obviously in our case, when we promote our own channels and the films we have on the channel, it's needless to say that all kinds of digital, online, including social media promotion is the way to do it. But there again, it's quite hard to get through, right? Just throwing something out and hope that somebody is interested and that it resonates somewhere. That's probably it usually doesn't work like that, right? It's always the question: how do we create the right context? Where do we position that film? I mean, the way for us is using our own established channel brand, which we have built up over the past 2.5 years. But again, just throwing something out there and hope, putting a film, simply speaking, on YouTube and hope that somebody will find it is usually not the case. Again, I'm repeating myself a little bit, but finding the right audience, addressing the right audience is always the big challenge, no matter which way you go.
Okay, great. So what I'm picking up from this is social media is key. We need to be able to tell our audiences what is out there, what is happening, and all that. My question, therefore, is how do you integrate the two? So promotion is one thing, that's marketing. Distribution is the other. How do you then turn these audiences into, or rather recruit, to use a better term, to be your consumers? Is this something that is working, or how do you work? How do you go about that? And you don't have to respond at the moment, Philip. Vanessa, at MultiChoice, what do you do? you've got social media marketing and promotion, but how do you convert this into actual subscribers? And I will ask the same after to Zoya.
So MultiChoice is a mammoth of a machine, right? We have our own department that does promote and market our content. We have pages for every single one of our channels. And what we do there, the importance of social media is that we give you a little bit of a taste. You know, we give you a taste of what you find our channel and a lot of trends on Twitter. Content comes from MultiChoice, from our hub. For us, I think we've sort of, I wouldn't say master, but calculation down of how to pull our audience from social media, because social media, our social media platforms are a content hub of their own, you know, and you almost feel like if you don't know what people are talking about, you're out, then that you know, begets subscribers.
Are you seeing any, before I come to you, Zoya, are you seeing any conversion rates in between promotion? Because you can promote, you have all platforms, Facebook, IG, and all that. But are you seeing people converting from that promotion onto actual taking app subscription?
Please repeat your question, just the last part.
Okay, no, my question is, from your social media promotion and marketing and all that, is there any conversion that you are seeing tangible that you can quantify and say, because we promoted this show or we did this on this platform, we are actually now seeing results in terms of uptick on subscription? Because you deal with subscription, right?
Yes.
Is there any research on that?
Yes, we have specialists who actually do weekly and monthly stats for us as the commissioning team to, you know, so let's, for instance, say Survivor is the show of the month, right? That we heavily voting. From the engagement on social media, it's sort of calculated against the amount of subscriptions we get that month. And they have different ways of which obviously I can't divulge on a public platform, but there are measurements that we do in order to calculate the promotion versus subscription rate.
Has there been an upgrowth, or is it stagnant, or is it going down?
So because of COVID, there was a downward trajectory because, you know, obviously people couldn't film, we had to play repeats and so forth. But now post-COVID, we are seeing an upward trajectory. We've launched so many different telenovelas, dramas, documentaries, and films alike. So yeah, so it ebbs and flows, but the ebb and the flow was begotten because of the pandemic.
Okay, totally understandable. I mean, all of us really kind of like took a spiral, you know, during COVID. But Zoya, I want to ask you the same question. When it comes to Zuku, have you also seen maybe a different trend in how consumers are receiving content, and how do you measure that?
At Zuku, yeah, we do usually. I think social media right now is key, especially on getting feedback on what content they like. You know, here at Zuku, we look at what the customer wants. You know, if we usually have the weekly, actually we have the daily posts that we do for content for all the channels that we have and the content we acquire. So that goes out every day. So we also have a team who look at what the feedback is from the consumers. Like you said, if there's a conversion rate, yes, we usually we have our customer experience team who looks at, okay, there's this comment that's come through and saying, oh, you know, I have a problem with this, and this mainly they also praise the content that's there, and they also talk about what they want. You know, like I said, the customer right now, the customer is key. So if we look at what we give them what they want, I think that's a conversion. That is what we get in terms of getting a customer on board, or if it's a disconnected customer, we know what they want and we give them the content that is there. I think I also agree with Vanessa. After the pandemic, during the pandemic, that was the time the shift happened. You know, when pandemic happened, we had all the physical things going out, all the marketing going out, and then when pandemic came, everything stopped. So everyone at first was like, okay, what should we do? What should we do? So I think the opportunity then came with social media, where we could take the direct sentiment of the customer, of what they want in terms of content. So it is. I think it gives us that feedback is there of the consumer, of what is needed, what content is needed, and that's what here at Zuku is what we look at and give the customer what they want.
So what does the customer want?
In terms of we look at because we look at the genres. There's the films that they need, the local films, the content that they're asking for. So in terms of local content, we've also looked, what they need is unique content. Some content that say, okay, why would I purchase Zuku if I can watch this movie elsewhere, if it's available on YouTube or it's available out on other platforms. So mainly we look at what is unique. So if a local film is unique and it connects with the customer, we have the different customer talking different languages. So if that content resonates with them, then that is what we look at. The key is unique content. What is unique? What is different? What is a differentiator that I onboard the film on my platform? What benefit do I get? We're both going to benefit. The filmmaker will benefit, and as a company, as a pay TV company, we benefit. So it's the uniqueness of that content that is what we look for.
Philip, let me just, before I come to Jeff, do you share these sentiments, especially as a distribution platform and also channel brand, which I would like to hear more about, the channel brand? Is this something, do you share the same sentiments, or are we working differently, like in silos? So this party is looking for this, you're looking for this one is looking for the other. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a constant evaluation process, right? I mean, there's the obvious relatively banal things that, of course, in a broad tendency, lighter things, lighter films, lighter content tends to work better with broader audiences than more sophisticated stuff, so on and so forth. But the understanding what works with which content works with which kind of audience, with which demographics and which markets, that's something we take a constant look at, which is a constant learning process, right? And to better understand how we program things. So we do, maybe to explain a little better, we do two things. So we run our own channel across a number of different platforms and different markets, but we also sell, let's say, to third-party licensees from our point of views. And so a platform we work with, they might change their strategy tomorrow. So it's always that different, or that look across the board, what kind of content we can position where. And it's very hard to give there a general answer, but basically I agree that this, of course, it sounds banal, but in the end it has to work with the audience, right? What the audience is interested in is the direction for us, right?
I think so. I don't know. I'm going to leave it up to the platform and the audience. Jeff, does this work for you? From what you've heard from Vanessa, Zoya, and Philip, you are more of a content creator, right? In animation. What they're proposing, does it work for you, or what do you think needs to be done if it's not working?
I think, yes, it definitely works. But they always say on the ground things are a bit different, especially for the smaller, more independent artists out there or content creators. I know I'm speaking for animators, but at the same time, we are also in the same sort of scenario as filmmakers in the country. But I think as a small independent studio, one of the strategies that we've taken when it comes to, because of course we don't have the budgets or we don't have the investments that will enable us to make, long form content, let's say feature films or things more than 60 minutes. or something. But we try as much as possible to use that little content that we have to, because it still amounts to content. You know, we might see it as not a film or not an animation, but it's still something that is consumed by the same audiences that consume these other films or other content in the mainstream sort of media. So one of the things that we try to do is, you know, optimize content for specific platforms, because what we have seen is some of the things that we make work well on YouTube, some of the things that we make work well on Instagram, some of them work well on TikTok. So when you bring that element of virality to it, I know it sounds a bit guerrilla or it sounds a bit crude, but just making something cool and then it goes viral, it goes a long way when it comes to distributing or propagating your brand out there. Hi, Philip. Yeah, I think there's something.
Yes, Philip.
No, I think it's probably fair to say that from the filmmakers or content producers' point of view, I think there are two basic scenarios, right? Either you work directly towards the audience, right? You have a direct audience relationship, and then you get that feedback immediately. If you go on social media platforms or channels like TikTok, of course, there's an immediate interaction. Of course, within a couple of hours, you will know if the content picked up or not, right? In the more traditional setup, right, where you work as a content producer, filmmaker, let's say the sales and distribution companies are the middleman towards the audience, right? And that then you don't have that immediate feedback from the audience, from the market, if something works or not. Of course, this setup is a bit more complex and requires much more, let's say, feedback loops within the stakeholders for the filmmaker to understand what might work or work not, right? Plus, of course, the time lag between, you know, creating a piece of content in the first place before it finally ends up with the audience, which usually takes at least a few months, if not a few years, until it finally reaches the market. So that's, of course, a completely different challenge then.
So from what you're saying, Philip, are you saying that especially when it comes to broadcast networks, platforms like MultiChoice and Zuku and the others, do they rely then on feedback, social media, to know then what to be able to place on their platforms? And how then do people become aware of this? And I'm coming back to you, Vanessa and Zoya, on this, because I think we really need to understand then, what does this mean to the content producer? Because at the end of the day, the platform needs content, the audience needs content, but the producer needs to know, how then do I get my content onto the platform? So are you saying that we rely a lot on feedback first before we can acquire or place content onto our platforms?
No. I mean, obviously, the most immediate feedback from the market are the numbers, right? So does the content sell? Are the ratings okay? What about my ad sales? So on and so forth. So that's like the immediate feedback I get. And the challenge we're facing is, of course, I mean, we always have to predict, like I mean, it's banal to say, but every piece of content is a different one. It's unique, right? So of course, when we make decisions about acquiring something, it is based on, let's say, the most recent market feedback, the most recent experience, and the estimation we give to it, how it might work, right? I mean, what absolutely doesn't work is that we test something first and then make a purchasing or acquisition decision. That obviously does not work. Once we have something on the table, we make an assessment based on our feedback and track record. Would it work with our audiences or clients we work with, or would it not work, right? And then it's a bet, so to say, on that particular piece of content. And then once we bring it to the market, once we have to go to market, then we'll finally see if it really works as we imagined, or maybe not. And I think when you are in this business for a number of years, I think you had all kinds of experiences, right? You had something on the table and you've been absolutely sure it will work, and you acquired it and you put all your hopes in it, and then nobody was interested, literally speaking, and the other way around. We're seeing, okay, let's see if that works, I'm not sure. And then obviously it was a big success. Things you have turned down and somebody else took, and bam, it was a huge success. And you think, man, I should have taken that as well. So it's, you know, that's the inherent risk of our business. that we have to get into something, we have to start producing something, we have to acquire something from the distribution's point of view, but we ultimately know only when it reaches the market, right? If somebody is interested or maybe not. And that's that I'm pretty convinced, despite all data, AI, and whatnot, this will always be the risk. There's no way around it.
Okay, got it. That's very interesting. I've never thought of it that way as well myself, but very good to hear. Vanessa, your thoughts. How do you ascertain that this product will work for your audiences? Do you conduct market research? And then also, most importantly, how do you collate this feedback for you to be able to know whether, you mentioned Survivor before, which has been doing very well. And I know you've also had very many popular shows on that. How do you really make this decision?
So I think Philip touched on the risk part. There is quite a lot of risk when it comes to making these decisions, but and also you can only know something successful once you get those rating in, right? I think the trick, however, is to look at your strategy, look at your content, and see what the audience likes already. Because the audience does have a strategy, right? And then tweaking that to create an appetite for different things. For instance, I've just started with a documentary slate on one of our other channels, and initially, because the audience was so used to having a drama in the plot, it didn't quite work. But that appetite and the preceding content then got the engagement we were looking for. So it's about testing with minimal risk, and that can be a very tricky thing to do. But you also don't want your content to, date and be stale. People are, there's so many competitors in the industry now. People are doing different things. Viewer audience engagement is a lot shorter. So you have to take things like that into consideration, and then again, mitigate the risk factors.
This is, I think, what Zoya also was talking about earlier in regards to audiences. You follow the audiences. You listen to their needs and their demands, and you do that. But and I'm opening this up to all of you. Audiences' trends, consumption trends change by the day, and it has been influenced by many factors. It's either by way of a device, or having access to data, or maybe just a preference in a particular genre. How then do you compartmentalize this, to know what it is that you need? So maybe Zoya, how do you go about this?
Yeah, that's what it is. Behind content acquisition, a lot happens. There's a lot of market research. There's a lot of research about what, if a particular content will work. Like, I think I agree with Vanessa also, there's that risk. So it is that maybe you can give a teaser to the audience and see what the feedback is, and then that's what then we can know that, okay, this content will work, that there is a strategy behind content. What is if the strategy is right and know what the audience wants, the market dynamics change, the audience preferences change. They might want maybe to watch a comedy film this month, or they want the moods change. So the right thing is to see what the market needs, what is different, what is it going to resonate with all the audiences. I think it's quite a risk. It is something you need to, if once it's out there, then you can know, okay, this is what. After the market research and you get the content and say, okay, this content. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot that happens behind the scenes. Okay. So we have to see what is working and then take a risk and say, okay, this is what the audiences want, and this is what I'm putting out. And if the customer likes that, and then it works. If it doesn't, then we have to look at the different other, which other content can work for the different audiences, different markets, different countries, different. They need the different content. So we have to look at the whole Africa space and say maybe one works for this country, this works for this country in the different regions. So a lot of research happens behind that.
Okay, so that's great, perfect, because you've already set up an infrastructure. You have your audiences, the market that you're targeting. And of course, at the end of the day, you need the consumers, you need the audiences to come in and watch your content. My question then, therefore, would be the middleman, the content producer. Do they have this information as to how to go about it? And I'm going to address this to Jeff. Do you get sufficient information as to what the platforms are doing for you to be able to place your content on their platforms for distribution? Is that available to you, that information? And how easily available or accessible is it?
Okay, I think for starters, it's I can't really answer that because we haven't really tried to approach to use that approach when it comes to distributing our content. We have because what has been happening is, I think, following engagement of users in social media and whatnot, we're able to see that not a lot of the younger generation who we actually want to grow with them as the market goes, very few of them use the traditional medium to consume their content. And what we try to do as a studio is follow where they're going. So, and follow the type of content that they're consuming, and also look at the themes that they mostly consume so that we are able to be at par with what they want or what they need for their consumption. So for ours, I just speak personally from my side and my studio. We haven't yet outgone that approach of looking for a middleman or a person who will sell our own content. We try as much as possible, as Philip said, engage with our users directly. And then as time goes, we're able to say, okay, because we as animation, we are at a severe advantage in that our pipeline is really, really long. For example, things like Pixar or DreamWorks, if they were to set up to make a feature film, they take more than 3 to 4 years to actually fulfill it. And that things change in 3 to 4 years, considering, even if you remember, just 3 years ago, we didn't know the COVID will happen and will be in such a scenario. So it's as I think, as Vanessa said, it's quite a challenge when it comes to just narrowing down on what exactly the audience wants. But the least you can do is just follow the trends and follow thematic elements that the people you want to go with consume. And I'm guessing you'll get a snippet of what they want and adapt your content to it. Yeah.
So you started by saying you might not be able to answer this question effectively, but you have, which is amazing, right? But now, actually following up on what you have said, there is a question here from our online delegates. How do we demystify the low uptake of, especially in relation to Kenyan films, on international platforms? And what you're saying, I think, relates a lot to that. So is there a disparity when it comes to selecting content, whether it's Kenyan or international? Is there a preference that is given to particular genres or territories, or even names or companies that come behind that? Philip, what do you think about that?
Yeah, very short answer is everything's possible, right? Practically, it always depends very much on the film. In the history of our company, we distributed 2 films. One, or 2 examples I want to mention. One is Nairobi Half-Life, which probably most of you have seen at one point. The other one is Supermodo. And I think both 2 films are perfect examples how far films from the continent, films from Kenya can go internationally, right? They certainly have have crossed the border of what you could, let's say, let me put this very carefully, as kind of a border for how far African films typically travel, and went far beyond. Just because, and this is, I know it's an insufficient explanation in the end, but of course they have been of exceptional quality, hit a new, note which has been seen before in film, right? And therefore crossed into other markets which are usually not too open for films from the continent, right? Particularly Supermoto, I think it's fair to say that we've almost literally almost sold it worldwide, right? Including into territories and countries which usually are very hard to access for films from the continent. For the simple reason they have been going beyond, what's usually the market of African audience, African films, which in our case, in many cases, is beside or beyond actually the continent, is certain territories within Europe and to a very wide extent North America. So, for example, like mostly of, let's say, Southeast Asia, usually we don't do a lot there, right? Because there's just not the demand or request for films on the continent. So we have a few territories which are of particular interest for you. Of course, we always give the footprint as much as possible, but again, it always depends in the end on the individual film or piece of content, how far we can go with it.
Okay, great. So now following up on that question, and Vanessa, there have been, from what Philip is saying in terms of things that you look for to build an audience, do you have a certain criteria that MultiChoice looks for when it comes to distribution of the films or broadcast of the content? And this is also in line with how then can you be able to help them broadcast this content outside of the country? And I'm reading here, it's not from me, I promise you. So there's a comment that we send our content to MultiChoice or whatever, which is only in East Africa. And Zoya, this also comes to you. But then we also want to have our content in other platforms, but then they're sent to different entities. For East Africa, talk to this person. For Western Africa, talk to this person. For Southern Africa, talk to this person. Is there a way that there can be an integration so that people don't have to jump through the hoops to get their content across the continent and maybe even internationally?
So with MultiChoice, we have a number of channels, right? And each channel aids to a different audience. And our departments, that's why we have so many different departments, because you can't have one person working on all of the channels, and I promise you nothing would ever get written or read or commissioned. So there is a reason why we have different departments, because our strategies are different for our different audiences. So the reason we send you to a different person for Showmax is what they are specifically in that department to serve a different kind of audience. For instance, Mzansi Magic serves to the Black mass audience who don't particularly want to watch things that aren't in Nguni languages, for instance, right? And then you'll have Mnet, which is completely English. So it's just because of our audience's appetites, we have to have specialists working on each channel, if I've answered your question.
Well, not quite. So I'm going to take a follow-up question. You say you have different departments that work for different territories and different regions, right? But here the audience is asking, we want our content to be seen across the border, when not just only in East Africa, West Africa, Southern or Central. When we submit our content, we are sent to 4 different regions. 3 of them will say, no, this doesn't work for our audiences and all that. But the interest of the consumer here, and also the content provider, is that they would love to show their content across the board. Is that something that multi-choice can be able to provide so that you don't have to necessarily get 3 different packages? You know, one from SA, Mzansi, another one is Zambezi Magic, and then you also subscribe to Showmax and the others. Is there a way you can have a seamless transition as to where people can be able to watch the content from wherever it is that they are? Because at the end of the day, we want the content to travel beyond borders. So even if the film has been produced in Kenya, I would love my film to also be watched in South Africa. And I'm sure Jeff is here listening. Please nod, Jeff, if you agree to this. You know, it's yeah. So is that something that maybe multi-choice might consider doing? Because you're not doing that right now. But it's a question here from the audience. John.
So I think just to circle back to what I said, it's very difficult for us as a broadcaster to put, let's say, one specific movie on all of our channels, right? Because it's not going to serve the audience that is watching that channel. However, when you have the bouquet, you have the luxury of flipping through all of the channels. So that way, film is being exposed to anyone who has that bouquet. So as you said, I can go onto Zambezi Magic and I know what content I'm going to find. Mnet, Mzansi, all of, you know, all the different channels. So the content is available to all audiences. Just because it's on one channel, it doesn't mean that they won't see it. However, we have strategies for every single one of our channels. And should the audience not have an appetite for that movie, then, you know, it will be very difficult to place it on a platform, you know, for a different audience. And then with that said, it also reflects badly on the creators, you know, whoever submitted the movie. If your movie doesn't rate and it's measured up against the other movies on that channel, it's going to seem as if the movie isn't good enough. And that's why we have strategies where we place it in on a specific channel where we know it's going to do well, where we know you'll get future commissions and the exposure that you need.
Okay. Zoya, before I come to you, Philip, Zoya, is this the same with Zuku? Do you also have the same considerations when it comes to audiences? Because I believe you're in 5 countries right now. Do you demarcate where you show your content and how is that working for you? And is it beneficial?
For us, I think we do when we onboard a channel, when we acquire the channel or a content, it goes across the 5 countries. We only maybe limit it if it's rights, if the producer or the distributor says, oh, you can't distribute this content in maybe Tanzania and it's only for maybe Kenya, Uganda. And then that's how we go according to the rights we receive. But for us, we try and put out the channel across all the 5 countries. Only if we see maybe Kenya might say, okay, this channel or this content is not it's not resonated with Kenya and it's just for Uganda, then we say, okay, then we can exclude it from the Kenya lineup and just leave it on the Uganda lineup. But usually our content goes across the 5 countries. It's only the restrictions on the license rights or the restrictions maybe, like I said, it depends on whether they say, we usually when we add it across. And then from there we see that, okay, there's maybe we get feedback from Uganda saying that I think this doesn't work for us. And then we say, okay, we can take it off the lineup and we can you can have the Uganda channels or the Malawi channels or the other channels. So that's how it is. So it is usually across.
Okay, that's great. Philip, you had your hand up?
Yes, exactly. Because I think that question which came from the audience is quite relevant because it addresses exactly the challenge we face on a constant basis, and which is part of our job to find a solution. Because on the other hand, of course, you want to reach as wide as possible with your film, right? And therefore, a wide availability is key. On the other hand, of course, you want to create relevance and again awareness in order to be seen. And if you go very wide, you know, and make the film available as widely as possible, you might just, you know, lose it out there in the nowhere, right? Because there's so much other stuff. And again, to finding this balance is always a challenge. In the very first place, yes, if I may say so, from a European perspective, I think one of the big strengths of the African continent is its massive diversity, right? They have all these different cultures, languages, and audiences which are out there. And indeed, it's always interesting to try to answer the question, okay, which film is relevant for which audience within the continent in the first place. It's the same in Europe, right? There's not one buyer, buying for all of Europe. There's somebody for Germany, there's somebody for France, there's somebody for Spain, so on and so forth. From a sheer market point of view, it makes it, of course, relatively ineffective, right? Because of all these broken down markets, particularly compared with the US market, right? With a huge market, same language, same legislation. So, of course, that they can find a niche for almost everything, which is not the case in the European or African markets, which by definition are incredibly diverse by itself. While all these things like versioning into the right language, versioning to the right audiences come into place. But again, that's our daily challenge. That's what we're working on, and that's what our job is. And that's what we're basically there for, so to say.
Okay, great. Because what you have just said takes me to the next question from the audience, who has just texted and said, can you please then enlighten us on what are the trends and or platforms that you're looking at when you're looking at diversifying and looking at content? Zoya has said their content goes out to all their subscribers. Vanessa has said we have regions that acquire content that is specific to a particular region. You're saying it's a little bit difficult to be able to identify what is happening. Jeff, as a content producer, what is your take on this?
Hi, thanks a lot. I think it still comes back to the rubrics that we use to define what an audience is, and I think it's a challenge that I'm probably going to give to Vanessa from MultiChoice and Zuku and Zoya from Zuku. Right now, personally, as I said, I have had my fair share of experience in Nairobi. At the same time, I did my master's in Johannesburg, so I lived there for about four years. And I would say we had a lot in common with the people that I met in Johannesburg than some people that I have interacted with in Nairobi. So I think our definitions of audiences should start changing from region-wise to more of thematic elements. Because I'll give you an example of how we consume social media. You'd find a channel a very specific channel about cats riding a bicycle. This is just a hypothetical example. And you'd find about 20 million subscribers on YouTube. That tells you something. That's an audience on its own. So my challenge to future distributors or like strategies of how we should approach distributing our content is that, as Philip said, there's a challenge in terms of narrowing down what sort of audience. And if you make your content so wide, you end up losing everyone. My approach is narrowing it down to specific thematic elements. And I'm pretty sure you will find someone somewhere out there, regardless of which region they're in, that will consume your content wholefully. So that's my take in terms of the question that was asked. And I think sort of a challenge or a thought experiment that we should have within ourselves and see what the future will hold when it comes to defining what an audience is.
Great, perfect. I love that. Vanessa, do you agree? Because during this discussion, we have, and we are talking about film distribution in the 21st century. Let's keep that, bear that at the back of our minds. And trends change on a daily. What we were watching in the 90s is not what we are watching right now, what we are consuming. So should it be thematic, as Jeff proposes, or should it be territory-based so that we can bring in a more, I guess, maybe that niche audience that you're looking at? Or should it be audience-driven, meaning content produced in Kenya can also be consumed in Nigeria? What are your thoughts on that, Vanessa?
So Jeff raised quite a great in terms of perhaps it is a good idea for us as to sit down and rethink how we can sharing the same content borders, right? But then there are reasons why that hasn't happened, and one of them being the language barrier. That's a factor. We know with a lot of our consumers, they like consuming content in their mother tongues, right? So we have Afrikaans channels, we have Zulu content, we have, you know, Tswana content, English content, and so forth. So I think that for us is where the decision is made, you know, to sort of give people individualistic views that content rates, you know, a lot better that way. And if your content, like I said, doesn't rate, it's very hard to relicense or recommission. But I think it wouldn't go amiss for us to perhaps look at other ways of having an inclusive viewing when it comes to licensing and commissioning content across borders.
You've raised an important point, language barrier. When I attend a lot of conferences and events, it's always an issue that comes up. I don't understand Yoruba. I don't understand Swahili or Kikuyu or wherever, Zulu or wherever it is that you're from. What can we do to mitigate this so that we can be able to spread our content not only within Africa, but internationally? Do you have any plans or thoughts in mind?
Yeah, so we do have sort of contingencies for that, right? That we've and one of them being dubbing. So a lot of our content we've started dubbing some of our content so that it can travel across borders. I know that as much as we've been pushing, I think all film creators for years now have been pushing for people to read subtitles in order to enjoy content. It's only being picked up now, you know, where people are actually engaging with content that they don't understand, so they'll read subtitles. And we found that a lot of people are exposed to more content, you know, and creators get their films out, even though there is that language barrier fact. So just to answer your question, we have started dubbing content just so that it can travel.
Is this something, Philip, that you also do with regards to your platform? Or maybe intend to introduce, or is it just not a thought at all?
I mean, the common denominator is an English language version, meaning it's subtitled in English if it's not original English language, right? And I'm a big believer that the content should be, or the film should be produced in their native mother tongue, right? Of course, versioning is an issue, right? And it always has to be considered, and the minimum thing which has to be done is an English language version, which means usually English subtitles. But the good news is that over the past years, the costs for that have massively come down, right? Massively through AI and machine learning. So it's not necessarily that a human being has to sit down and translate the entire film word by word. That makes it a bit easier and let's say makes the content more mobile, so to say, and traveling across the globe, right? Some would say probably that you should, if you somehow can produce an English language that produce, do all the dialogues in English. I'm not too convinced, right? I think it's usually for the better of the film if it's produced in its native mother language, let's say culturally fits to that particular film in the first place, and then take care of the versioning later on.
Okay, so just following up on that before I come to you, Zoya, because I also need a response on this. You've mentioned the word cost. A lot of content creators right now, or maybe it has not been the trend before, but when we are saying we want to open up the borders, that we want the content to travel outside of our native, or our home, how then is this cost effective? Is this something that is there something that they need to do to be able to at least ensure that even if it's in the native language, it can also be watched in other countries where the language may not be the same? And what needs to be done then? And I'm talking here specifically on cost, because we've talked about, Vanessa mentioned dubbing, you've talked about subtitling. We all know, Jeff, I'm sure will agree to this, that it's a cost to subtitle or to dub content for it to travel. What can be done to be able to manage this cost? Because it seems like it's a factor. It's something that really needs to be, maybe producers need to add on to their budget. So it's no longer just about pre-production, making sure sound is good, film is good, but there also has to be the post in terms of how then do we sell, market, and distribute this content elsewhere. What would your advice be on that? How can they go about that?
I would say that, in fact, the costs of at least, let's say, creating English subtitles as the very minimum should always be considered. I'm aware this is much easier to say than actually executed in production. But let's say the English subtitles are, let's say, the minimum threshold to get into the international market at all. It may be I want to approach a platform, maybe because I want to enter festivals, right? In order to submit a film to whatever kind of film, to whatever kind of festival internationally, I need to have the English subtitles in place, right? So that is a cost, which in the end is not that incredibly high, but it's there, understood. That should be incorporated in the budget in any ways, because it's just a simple difference. If you know, am I able to enter other markets or am I not able to enter other markets? Is almost as the same question. Do I want to have a file of my finished film? Yes, of course I want to have it, because otherwise the film is not there. It's almost the same counts for the English subtitles. They need to be in place in order to access markets.
Okay, great. Totally agree. Zoya, what are your thoughts on that? And more specifically with regards to AI, because we've seen AI is now literally thinking for us, right? Even as content producers. Is there any way that we can take advantage of that, especially when it comes with controlling the language barrier with regards to dubbing and subtitling, as Philip and Vanessa has alluded to?
I think what I would say, like I said, is opportunity. You know, the language barriers and all. If there is a channel or there is a content that goes out, like we put, as I said earlier, that we put the content across all the countries, just depending on the restrictions. But otherwise, like it is an opportunity, and it is at first hand, because we had content that was, I'll go specific to Asia content, Indian content that is loved. It's not only understood by Indians, you know, it's gone across and it's dubbed in Swahili, it's dubbed Swahili for Kenya, Swahili for Tanzania. And now we're seeing opportunities in Uganda, and they're saying, oh, I'm watching this content, it's in Swahili, but I love that content and I want it dubbed in the Luganda language. So, and then Malawi comes up saying, I want the same channel dubbed in Chichewa. So I think it's opportunity. If we're giving it, there is that cost element of the subtitling. There is the subtitles is there. There is that dubbing cost that is there, but it's what language they want. It's the content they enjoy and they want it. And you know, the producer, we go back to the producer and tell them, okay, I want this content now in Chichewa, or I want this in Luganda. Can you give it to me? So it is an opportunity also for the film producer, that they've got more coming to them, more opportunity coming to them for the cross borders. So that's what I would say in terms of the dubbing and language barriers.
Okay.
So if I've answered the question.
Well, you have. Like I said, it's a discussion, it's not a debate. We don't need to have a conclusive answer here today. We are exploring.
Yeah.
This is very exploratory. Now that we are talking about, you know, dubbing, subtitling, costs, including this into the budget. So there are financial implications here. Is there any advice as to maybe how content creators can be able to go about this, which in return will benefit all parties, so it becomes a win-win-win? Are there any solutions maybe that we can be able to approach with regards to this? Vanessa, I think you have maybe more experience in this.
So I can only speak from the experience of multi-choice, right? And we, in our budgets, have line items for subtitling and so forth. So producer doesn't have to be quite concerned about that. So whether you're getting commissioned or licensed, there is a line item for that specific thing. So I think that helps to put some relief on the content creators and filmmakers out there, so that it's not on their shoulders per se. I do know that other distributors don't necessarily do that. However, we do, just so that it makes everyone's lives easier, especially producers, because they have a limited budget sometimes, and extra costs like that can make or break their productions. So we try to aid in that way.
Okay, great. Jeff, how does this work for you, especially in animation, which is also a very costly affair? By the minute, it takes you like maybe 7 or 14 days just to get to a minute. When it comes now to selling your content, distributing your content rather internationally, because we are talking about distribution in the 21st century, is there anything that you believe that you can do as content creators to help you jump onto that step? So as Vanessa said, they can aid in a certain part, they can advise, but what about content creators? Is this something that you can maybe be able to look into?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll sort of circle back to one of the key things that had been discussed before, which was language barrier and how we try to demarcate our audiences. But at the same time, animation is definitely at a great advantage because we don't necessarily have to use language. We can just emphasize on visuals and themes that are able to be related for a person in Africa or a person in Europe or wherever they want to consume their content. So that's the major advantage that we have. And if that whole content is recyclable and can easily date years from now. But then another, maybe, as you said, I also want this to be open-ended, and I'm not trying to make anything conclusive. I'll just try to play the devil's advocate here. I am currently 28 years old, and I think anyone from 27 years going back and who sort of had access to television probably consumes Japanese anime. I think a lot of you have seen or heard about it, even if you haven't, but at least you should at least know. This is animated content made from Japan. And if you look at it, it's been consumed globally, this isn't just like an African or an American phenomenon. It's a global phenomenon. Yet this content is purely in Japanese. But now they really focus on, as you said, coming back to the challenge that I had given before, the thematic elements defining the audience. And if you look, a lot of what Japanese anime has done is demarcate their audiences not by region, but more of age and gender and all these things. So it defines who their content goes out to. So it's more just a challenge that I will give distributors in Africa specifically, because the reality is, yes, we might want, the current audience might want the languages to be in their specific language, but you should at least acknowledge that there's a huge number of the urban youth who don't necessarily identify, like fully identify with those specific languages. It's sad, but it's the reality. And that's where the audience, that's why they are more to, they're leaning towards consuming Western content rather than, locally made content, because they feel it resonates better with them than what is being produced here. So when we are able to grow up with them or sort of just appreciate where they are and give them what they want, I'm pretty sure we are able to create a sustainable model for the current state of the industry. Feel free to challenge it. I'm just speaking from observations that I have had in my interactions with people, not just in Kenya, but also in South Africa.
Thanks, Jeff. I don't think anybody's challenging anything. Absolutely. And I love Japanese anime, I guess, because of my son. He's an animator as well in your field. So I'm seeing his samples and everything that he has done. Before I take on more questions, there's one thing that I really want to ask with regards to genres, because everybody keeps talking about this, genres, genres, genres. And you had Japanese animes cutting across the world. Philip, Zoya, Vanessa, in whichever order, are there particular genres that you feel work best to cut across? Or what are your thoughts on that? Is it audience related? We've talked about audience, we've talked about territory, we've talked about themes. Anybody who wants to go up? Philip?
Well, it's a difficult question to ask, and again, very hard to generalize, right? I think I said in an earlier point that, of course, lighter things, lighter genres tend to work for broader audiences, of course, vice versa. I wouldn't say that it will probably be too easy to say, okay, if you wanna cut across, all different markets, do comedy or do an action film or whatnot. I think first question is always where do you want to end up with your film, and then decide what the best way is to get there, right? I don't want to be quoted on something Philip said that, and because it's just very hard to generalize. Yeah.
Okay, I love that. Vanessa, then coming to you, Zaya.
Sorry, I think I lost you for a second. What was the question?
The question is, are there genres that you feel cut across best, and not only in Africa, but even outside internationally? And yeah, that's basically it.
Okay, thank you. So definitely, I think two that pop into mind immediately would be melodrama. And the second would be any content that is lighthearted. I think coming out of the pandemic, there was a lot of sorrow. So what we've noticed is that people want to laugh, so romantic comedies, romantic dramas, those travel quite well as stories with that have melodrama weaved into them. But as Philip said, don't quote me.
No. People are looking for hope and inspiration. So I totally get it.
Yeah.
Zoya, anything on your end?
I think on my view, it's hard to specify. It's hard to specify which genre, what maybe age. It depends. It just depends on who is the audience. What they're enjoying. It also depends on the mood. Like Vanessa mentioned, it after the pandemic, there's a light-hearted, but I think you can't specify what genre a certain audience would like to enjoy.
I like that you have mentioned audience. That is very close to my heart, because who are we distributing or producing this content for? So just a few more questions before we wrap up. From Jeroge Maina, this is a question for you, Vanessa. Can Kenya content creators pitch to Showmax South Africa, and how does one go about it? We had talked about this earlier, about the whole different regions and yeah.
So I don't see a reason why not. We do have a portal, a multi-choice portal, which sort of directs you. If you go onto the multi-choice website, it directs you to the different channels. So what you'll then do is you'll put a proposal in there. It will get read in one of the sifting sessions, and thereafter you will either be called in for a pitch or rejected, depending on how the panel rates the film. But I see no reason why. We have so many different languages and films and different content on Showmax from across the board. So it's definitely a possibility.
So it's possible for a Kenyan producer to go and pitch in South Africa?
For Showmax.
Yes. What about Zambezi Magic, Mzansi, and the others? Is that also open?
Mzansi, our audience, so those channels are predominantly 95 to 100% vernacular. languages. So it would be difficult. And I think just going back, another point I wanted to raise with the language is that there's specific nuances that come with different cultures, and it would be very difficult to translate those if you don't know what they are, or for the audience to enjoy them if they've never been exposed to those nuances.
Okay, got it. So, Joroge Maina, I hope you have been enlightened now. So don't hold back. Go out. Take it. There's another question from Faith Kanini, and I think I'm going to address this to Philip. She asks, what does it take to get into the independent distribution business? So, well, now, since here you're the guru, so help her out.
I think it's the first time somebody called me guru. Okay. Is it in regards, I assume, to the, as a personal career, right? Not with a film, but as a...
I mean, the question says to get into independent. So I'm guessing that they would like to become a distributor like yourselves, like Rush Lake, to see how maybe they can also be able to help other content creators and platforms to deliver this content to our audiences.
Very good question. Let me put out the problem first, because distribution and sales is usually not taught at film schools, right? Film schools are very much focused on production. I've been in film school myself, studied production. So I actually learned the business of sales and distribution only after film school when I started my own career and worked for other companies, right? And that would be my recommendation here. And to have training on the job, to have learning by doing, and see how this whole works. Because I think it's fair to say it is a rather complex world. It's an ever-changing world. It's a dynamic world. So it's not that it's simply speaking, it's training on the job, because there's no formalized education for working in sales and distribution, for good or for bad.
Exactly. Yes, and that's the thing. I was in another panel discussion yesterday at Kalasha on Distribution 254, specifically with regards to Kenyan content. And the delegates there said there's no training. There is no formal training in distribution. So how does that one then get into that business? I think this is what Faith is trying to understand. Do they look for internship with a distribution company, or how do they get started? Because I believe from her question, she's passionate about this.
Yeah. Well, it's probably looking for some job openings with companies in sales distribution. We currently don't have any. It might change anytime, but that's how it is. Or sometimes, and I'm speaking out of experience here, some workshops and trainings are offered. We actually, I was facilitator on one workshop just a few days ago, which was held by the Kenya Film Commission in conjunction with GIZ from Germany. So we had approximately 30 filmmakers from Kenya in a workshop where we spoke about the distribution world for 5 days. So I think that was very fruitful for both sides, for all of us there. So that is sometimes often, and I can only encourage film commissions and bodies, across the continent to do that. Which, by the way, and I always mention that, it's not an African problem per se. It's the same in Europe, right? There is, no formalized training on sales and distribution. And many filmmakers, unfortunately, lack a certain knowledge in that area, which, of course, again, is key, to do the job properly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to add on to that, onto what Philip has said, Faith, a lot of us really chance on this. Media Pros is also a distributor. I never trained in distribution. I love content, and I love seeing people, content producers being able to get their content onto the various platforms that we have today. So let's just open it up. We'll share the contact details, Vanessa's, Philip's, Zoya's, and also Jeff, as much as he's not so much in distribution, but he also might have some suggestions that he can share with you. So, but it's not easy. I'm not gonna lie, it's not easy. Zoya, I've got a question for you from Kenneth Omondi. How do film distributors identify the right markets for the content they share selling? for the
Sorry,
content
just
they
repeat
sell.
it.
Kenneth Omondi says, how do film distributors identify, and at this point I'm looking at you as a distributor because as a platform, Zuku is a distributor, right?
Yeah.
Identify the right market for the content that they are selling to the consumers rather, or broadcasting, yeah.
Yeah, we look at, like I said, it depends on how it resonates to the different audiences. Of course, the market research, that's how we look at whether the content will work in different regions, different countries. So it's all about when we receive the content, we look through what it has, what language it is, what the genre is. Like you said, if it's if it's a different movie or what it is about. So I think it's more of market research. It's what we think will resonate to the different regions, different audiences who will perceive that content. If we think the content will work for a specific region, like I said, our content is available across all the 5 countries. So I think that's what it will go across, and that is what is looked at.
So this is where everything what we've been talking about, like language barrier, accessibility, awareness, and everything comes in, right? When it comes to identifying where to distribute your content to, right?
Yes, it is. It's all about market research. If we think the content will resonate with the audience, like you said, you like the audience, the word audience. I think that's where we then distribute the content.
Do you think, and I'm opening this up now to everybody, do you think maybe there is a role, and this question came up yesterday, so I'm just bringing it up today. Do you think there's a need to have a distributor act as the middleman, or can content producers come to you directly? I think it's important to also just address this very briefly before we wrap up.
Sure, I think I can take that up first. I think they can come approach directly. That is, we are open, whatever. If you want to go through a distributor, if you have a number of movies, if you wish to go through a distributor and come to the pay TV, that is fine. If you want to come directly, that is also fine. So we're open in either way.
Vanessa, is that the same case for you, or do you need a distributor coming to you? Do you engage directly with content providers?
Yes, we definitely engage directly with content providers. In fact, it doesn't matter how much experience you have. If you have a good concept that you've proposed, we will pick that up, and then we'll support you by giving you a seasoned supervising producer. You know, a strong concept is a strong concept. It doesn't matter where it comes from or who it comes from. It's just about backing you up with an experienced individual that can guide you in terms of, actioning out your production correctly. And when I say that, I don't only mean what we see on screen, but I'm talking about budgets and, thinking ahead in terms of marketability and so forth.
Awesome. Philip?
Yep.
Do distributors play a role in this whole process? Is it important to have one, or doesn't really matter?
No. Well, no. In fact, I'm a big believer in division of labor. Right? There are content producers, content creators on one hand. There are sales and distribution platforms on the other side. Then there are platforms, and each job is quite different, right? And it requires different skills, right? And focusing on what can I do best and what my job is probably the best way forward. I would never put myself in a position where I think, I know exactly what a producer has to do, and I know the producer's job much better than I do. No, not at all. I'm not a producer. I'm in a different field, and I think it's the same the other way around.
Absolutely. Jeff, as our content creator here today, mainly, what do you think the role of the distributor? Does it work for you, or doesn't it?
It's a bit of a catch-22 because we live in sort of an era where a lot of content that is created is user-generated. Like, it's not really people consuming, but more of people producing themselves or creating content themselves. So the market has become a bit more dynamic when it comes to exactly how they consume it. And I wouldn't throw away the notion of having a distributor in the market. But at the same time, what we should understand is that it's growing and growing. So we just need to diversify on the ways we distribute it, because we definitely need a person who, as a content creator, I will definitely need a person who does that for me so that I can focus on my craft itself. But now I think it's that person who distributes it for me now needs to learn to diversify their model for even me to benefit and for it to have a larger outreach. So yeah, I think we definitely need distributors and more distribution models.
Awesome, thank you. I am going to take Jeff's as remark as his last remark because he has spoken, said some very pertinent issues. I am going to just ask Zoya, Vanessa, and Philip very briefly. Do you have any last remarks before we wrap up?
From my end, I think there's a lot of opportunities. The market is diverse. There's a lot of there's a lot that can be done. There's working together, engaging. I think there's a lot of opportunities, like I mentioned from the start. There's a lot that the content market offers. So I think we should all be open to that.
Great. Vanessa?
Yeah, we are in ever-changing times, and I think up to us, no matter on what side of the fence you are, whether you are a distributor or a filmmaker, it's up to us to, find new ways to create and distribute our films and content. And I think that's why this panel is so imperative, and these conversations are so imperative because we can only move forward as a collective. We can make decisions, but filmmakers won't, it won't make sense to them or vice versa. So I think there's power in collaboration, and there's so much more we can do when it comes to film distribution. So I think marrying our minds together, would be beneficial to the entire industry. And I'm speaking on a global perspective now as well.
Thank you. Philip, your last remarks?
Yeah, totally agree what the other said. But to add on, I think we're rather in the beginning of, the global audiences being interested in content and films from the African continent. So I think there's a lot more to come. Not, disregarding the challenges, but having a focus on the opportunities. And I think that's what every filmmaker, content producer can embrace or should embrace.
Awesome. Thank you. Jeff, is there something that you might want to add, although I took your last remark as like a really good one?
Yeah, I think I don't want to shadow what I've already said before. So yeah, I think I just appreciate mine. I appreciate everyone who's here and the other distributors who are here. I think you've done amazing work in the continent and we really appreciate. Thank you.
Okay, great. So that brings us to the end of our discussion today. We were talking about film distribution in the 21st century. In case you joined us late or maybe did not have an opportunity to join, there are very key elements that came out. Collaboration has come out very strongly, creating awareness in terms of what it is that we are doing. Accessibility, how then do we engage with these platforms and where it is that we want to get our content, and also connections, building your network. This is what it is about. You've got content, but you don't know whom to talk to. So it's important to build your connections. And by attending this discussion of the Kalasha International Film and TV Market is one step ahead, all right? So you've already made a good choice. Social media came out strongly. Don't shy away from that. Film festivals, when it comes to distribution in the 21st century, this is where you get your content valued, you get recognition, you get awarding. And guess what? When you go to the platforms, when you're having a discussion, whether it's by way of a distributor or it's directly, guess what? You can actually negotiate a really, really good deal. Language barriers, we want to kill that. This is what we are saying in the 21st century. I want to be able to consume content that is coming from the south or from the north or the west, and I will be able to enjoy it. And not only even here in diaspora and in the international communities. So opportunities are available. You just need to seek them. I want to thank my panelists, Ms. Vanessa from MultiChoice, the commissioning editor, Mr. Philip Hoffman from Rush Lake, Zoya Ahmed from Zuku Wananchi Group, and Jeff Mandela, Ada Animation Studio. My name is Wakeshi Murage. I have been your moderator for this session, and I want to thank you, and I hope that you will continue engaging with us in the other panel discussions during the Kalasha Festival. Have a good day.